For 3 straight years, America's housing market felt borderline indestructible. Bidding wars erupted in quiet suburbs. Starter homes sold for six figures over asking. Families with solid incomes lost properties to faceless investors who paid cash sight unseen. Home ownership, the cornerstone of the American dream, became something distant and almost mythical for millions of people. But 2025 has cracked that facade wide open. The relentless climb has stalled. In cities that once defined the boom, home prices aren't just plateauing, they're plunging. Markets that seemed immune to gravity are suddenly facing reality. Overpriced listings sit untouched for months. Sellers who once dictated terms are now slashing prices just to attract attention. Buyers who were desperate only a year ago are walking away, sensing better deals ahead. The shift isn't subtle, it's unmistakable. And the cities experiencing the steepest declines aren't random outliers. They're major metros, places that drew headlines during the surge and are now making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Today, we're counting down 11 U.S. cities where home prices are crashing hard in 2025. Stick around for number one because what's happening there could reshape housing across the entire country. And if you're serious about understanding where real estate is headed, hit that subscribe button right now because we're diving deep. Let's get into it. Number 11. Boise, Idaho. Boise rode a tidal wave during the pandemic. Remote workers fled crowded coastal cities, chasing mountain views and affordable space. Homes that used to sell for $350,000 suddenly commanded $600,000. Builders scrambled to keep up, convinced demand would last forever. But by 2025, the wave has crashed, and the wreckage is unmistakable. Home prices have tumbled roughly 11% year over year, one of the sharpest drops in the Mountain West. Listings that once sparked bidding wars now linger for 3, 4, even 6 months without a single offer. The issue is simple. Boise built for Californians with tech salaries, but those buyers have left. Remote work policies tightened. Companies recalled employees. And suddenly the flood of out-of-state money dried up overnight. What remains is a local economy that never supported those inflated prices. Teachers, healthcare workers, and service employees can't afford homes priced for six-figure incomes. New developments in Meridian and Eagle sit partially sold, with builders offering deep discounts just to move inventory. Investors who bought at the peak are underwater, watching their equity evaporate as comparables drop week after week. Homeowners who stretch their budgets are trapped, unable to sell without taking massive losses. The suburbs that symbolized Boise's explosive growth now feel hollow, dotted with for-sale signs and unfinished construction. Coffee shops and boutiques that thrived on newcomer energy are closing down. The optimism that defined the boom has been replaced by something quieter and far more anxious. Boise's fall is a textbook case of what happens when hype outpaces fundamentals. The city that became America's pandemic darling is now a cautionary tale, a reminder that when the momentum stops, gravity takes over fast. Number 10. Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix spent years positioning itself as the Sun Belt's most reliable growth story. Population surged. Corporations relocated. Entire master-planned communities materialized in the desert, built on the promise of endless expansion. Home prices climbed relentlessly, and developers kept pouring concrete, convinced demand would never soften. But in 2025, that confidence has shattered. Prices have dropped about 9%, and inventory has ballooned to levels not seen since the Great Recession. Homes in Chandler, Gilbert, and Scottsdale that used to sell within days are now collecting dust on the market. The problem isn't a lack of interest, it's a lack of affordability. Wages haven't kept pace with the price surge. Mortgage rates remain stubbornly high, and the wave of migration that powered Phoenix's boom has slowed to a trickle. Californians who once flocked to Arizona are staying put or choosing cheaper states. Retirees on fixed incomes are balking at property taxes and soaring insurance premiums. Investors who bought rental properties during the frenzy are offloading them at losses, unable to cover carrying costs as rental demand weakens. Builders who launched projects in 2022 and 2023 are now sitting on spec homes they can't move. Some are offering upgrades, rate buydowns, even covering closing costs, anything to avoid holding finished inventory through another season. Meanwhile, homeowners who bought at the top are stuck. Refinancing is impossible. Selling means accepting a loss. and waiting feels like gambling on a rebound that may never come. The desert sprawl that once symbolized opportunity now feels overextended, a landscape dotted with half-filled subdivisions and fading optimism. Phoenix's correction isn't a blip. It's a reckoning, a market that expanded too fast and is now paying the price for believing its own hype. Number 9. Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas has always lived on extremes, but in 2025, its homeowners facing the losing streak. For years, the city thrived on an influx of Californians fleeing high taxes and even higher home prices. Investors grabbed properties at a rapid pace, betting on continued appreciation. New developments spread across the valley, from Henderson to North Las Vegas, each one marketed as the next hot neighborhood. But the momentum has vanished. Home prices have dropped roughly 10% since their peak, and the slide shows no sign of stopping. Listings are piling up. Homes that used to attract multiple offers now sit with price cuts stacked on top of price cuts. The core issue is Las Vegas's fragile economic foundation. Tourism, the city's lifeblood, hasn't fully recovered. Casinos are hiring fewer workers. Convention traffic remains inconsistent. And the service industry jobs that support much of the local population don't pay enough to support inflated home prices. At the same time, thousands of short-term rental properties are being dumped back into the market as owners realize Airbnb income can't cover rising costs. Homes that were cash cows during the pandemic are now financial anchors, dragging down investors who over-leverage themselves. Suburban areas like Summerlin and Green Valley, once considered premium, are seeing significant declines. Builders are slashing prices on new construction, undercutting existing homeowners and creating a downward spiral that's hard to escape. Retirees who move to Vegas for warm weather and low taxes are reconsidering as insurance premiums skyrocket and home values sink. The lights on the Strip still shine bright every night, but beyond that glittering facade, the housing market is unraveling. Las Vegas is learning the same painful lesson it learned in 2008. When speculation drives growth and fundamentals don't follow, the house always wins. And this time it's not the homeowners. Number 8. Tampa, Florida. Tampa's housing surge was fueled by a perfect storm: remote work, low taxes, and an endless stream of people chasing sunshine and affordability. From 2020 to 2023, prices exploded. Bidding wars became routine. Sellers had all the power, and buyers had no choice but to stretch their budgets or lose out entirely. But by 2025, the script has flipped. Home prices have dropped about 8%, and the market that once felt unstoppable is grinding to a halt. Listings in neighborhoods like West Chase, New Tampa, and South Tampa are sitting unsold for months. Sellers who expected quick closings are slashing prices, offering credits, and still struggling to generate interest. The problem is multifaceted. First, insurance costs have exploded. Florida's property insurance crisis has made homeownership prohibitively expensive for many buyers. Policies that cost $2,000 a year now run $8,000 or more, and in some coastal areas, coverage is nearly impossible to find. Second, the migration wave has slowed. Remote work policies tightened, and many who moved to Florida during the pandemic have quietly moved back. Third, rising HOA fees and special assessments are hammering condo owners, particularly in older buildings facing mandated safety inspections. Investors who bought during the boom are selling at losses, unable to make the math work with higher carrying costs and softer rental demand. New construction has flooded the market, with builders competing aggressively on price, undercutting resale values across the board. Even waterfront properties, once considered bulletproof investments, are struggling. Buyers are increasingly wary of hurricane risk, and lenders are tightening standards for homes in flood zones. The Tampa Bay area still offers appeal: warm weather, no state income tax, and a growing job market. But the housing market has decoupled from reality, and the correction is brutal. The city that symbolized the pandemic migration boom is now a cautionary tale about what happens when prices rise too fast and the supporting infrastructure can't keep up. Number 7. Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville spent the last decade branding itself as the South's coolest city. Music, culture, booming job growth, and a steady influx of transplants from pricier markets turned it into a darling of real estate investors. Home prices soared, neighborhoods transformed overnight, and the belief was simple: Nashville would just keep rising. But 2025 has shattered that narrative. Prices have dropped approximately 9%, and inventory has swelled to levels that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. Homes in East Nashville, Germantown, and the Gulch are sitting on the market far longer than sellers anticipated. Price reductions are becoming standard, and even then, offers are slow to materialize. The root cause is oversupply. Developers flooded the market with new builds, luxury townhomes, and high-end condos, all aimed at affluent out-of-state buyers. But that wave of buyers has receded. Many who moved to Nashville during the pandemic are discovering the reality doesn't match the hype. Traffic is terrible, property taxes have surged, and the cost of living, once Nashville's biggest selling point, now rivals cities people left behind. Locals who were priced out during the boom aren't rushing back either. Wages haven't kept pace with housing costs, and affordability remains a significant barrier. Investors who bought rental properties are facing thinner margins as rental demand softens and expenses climb. Some are exiting the market entirely, contributing to the growing inventory glut. Suburban areas like Franklin and Brentwood, long considered safe bets, are also cooling. Homes that used to sell within days are now lingering, and sellers are finding that premium school districts alone aren't enough to justify inflated prices. The Music City still hums with energy, but the housing market has hit a sour note. Nashville's correction is a reminder that even the trendiest markets aren't immune when fundamentals don't support prices. The city that rode the wave of pandemic migration is now learning that what goes up fast can come down just as quickly. Number 6. Austin, Texas. Austin's rise was legendary, and its fall is proving equally dramatic. During the pandemic, the Texas capital became ground zero for tech migration. Remote workers, venture capital, and billion-dollar startups fled the coasts, transforming Austin into a self-proclaimed Silicon Hills. Home prices skyrocketed, hitting levels that left longtime residents stunned. Bidding wars were fierce, and sellers held all the cards. But by 2025, the music has stopped. Home prices have plummeted roughly 12%, one of the steepest drops in the country. Listings that once sparked frenzy now sit untouched for months. Open houses that used to draw crowds are sparsely attended. The shift is jarring, and the reasons are clear. Tech layoffs gutted the high-income buyer pool that fueled Austin's boom. Companies like Tesla, Oracle, and Meta, which anchored the city's growth story, have scaled back dramatically. The influx of California money has evaporated, leaving a market built for six-figure earners without enough six-figure earners to support it. At the same time, builders went all in during the boom. New developments spread across suburbs like Cedar Park, Round Rock, and Pflugerville. Thousands of homes hit the market simultaneously, creating a supply glut that shows no sign of easing. Investors who bought rental properties are underwater, unable to cover mortgages as rental rates soften. Some are panic selling, further depressing prices and feeding a downward cycle. Even the luxury market, once untouchable, is struggling. High-end homes in Westlake Hills and Tarrytown are sitting unsold, with sellers slashing prices and still receiving lowball offers. The city's signature vibe, quirky, creative, fiercely independent, hasn't changed, but the economic foundation has cracked. Austin's fall is a stark reminder that no market, no matter how hot, is immune to correction. The city that soared fastest is now plunging hardest, and the ripple effects are being felt across the entire Sun Belt. Number 5, Denver, Colorado. Denver spent years riding high on a reputation for quality of life, mountain access, craft beer culture, a strong job market, and just enough urban energy to feel relevant. Home prices climbed steadily, then accelerated sharply during the pandemic as remote workers poured in from both coasts. Demand felt endless, and sellers basked in a market where homes sold over asking within hours. But 2025 has brought Denver back to earth with a thud. Prices have dropped about 10%, and the inventory that was once scarce is now abundant. Homes in neighborhoods like Capitol Hill, Highlands, and Stapleton are sitting on the market far longer than anticipated. Price cuts are routine, and even then, offers are tepid at best. The problem is twofold. First, affordability has reached a breaking point. Colorado's median income hasn't kept pace with housing costs, and locals who were priced out during the boom aren't suddenly able to afford homes just because prices dipped slightly. Second, migration has slowed dramatically. The remote work wave that powered Denver's surge has receded, and many who moved to Colorado are reconsidering as the reality of high costs, harsh winters, and limited job flexibility sets in. Suburban areas like Aurora, Lakewood, and Thornton are feeling the pain too. Builders overestimated demand and flooded the market with new construction. Now those homes are competing with resales, and everyone is lowering prices to stay relevant. Investors who bought during the peak are bleeding equity, and some are walking away entirely, letting properties slip into foreclosure rather than continuing to absorb losses. Even the luxury market around Boulder and the foothills is softening. Buyers with money are waiting, sensing that prices have further to fall. Denver's correction is a humbling moment for a city that believed its appeal was bulletproof. The mountains aren't going anywhere, but the housing market that once seemed as solid as granite is now revealing cracks that can't be ignored. Number 4. Salt Lake City, Utah. Salt Lake City's housing boom felt almost surreal. A combination of tech growth, population influx, and stunning natural surroundings made it one of the fastest appreciating markets in the country. Homes that sold for $400,000 in 2019 were fetching $700,000 by 2022. The city's mix of outdoor lifestyle and urban opportunity attracted buyers from across the West, and sellers enjoyed one of the most competitive markets in America. But in 2025, that chapter has closed. Prices have dropped roughly 11%, and the market that once moved at lightning speed has slowed to a crawl. Listings in neighborhoods like Sugar House Avenues and Mill Creek are accumulating days on market that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. Price reductions are standard, and sellers are offering concessions just to generate interest. The shift traces back to overbuilding and shifting migration patterns. Developers went all in during the boom, and now thousands of new homes are hitting a market with fewer buyers. Remote work policies tightened, and many who moved to Utah during the pandemic are heading back to their home states. At the same time, the cost of living in Salt Lake has risen sharply. Property taxes, insurance, and everyday expenses have climbed, eroding the affordability that once made the city attractive. Investors who bought rental properties are finding margins too thin to justify holding, and many are selling at losses. Suburban areas like West Jordan, Draper, and Lehigh are also cooling. New construction is competing directly with resales, and builders are slashing prices to move inventory, dragging down values across entire neighborhoods. Even the demand from growing tech companies hasn't been enough to stabilize the market. Hiring has slowed, and the influx of high-earning professionals has tapered off. Salt Lake City's correction is a reminder that even markets with strong fundamentals can overheat. The mountains still loom majestically in the background, but the housing market that once seemed destined to climb forever is now sliding back toward equilibrium, and the descent is steeper than anyone expected. Number 3. Portland, Oregon. Portland's housing market was riding high before 2025, buoyed by its reputation for livability, green spaces, and a thriving food and arts scene. Prices climbed steadily, and buyers from California flocked north, seeking more affordable alternatives to the Bay Area. But this year, the shine has faded. Home prices have dropped approximately 10%, and the market is littered with listings that sit untouched for months. Homes in neighborhoods like Alberta, Hawthorne, and Division are being discounted repeatedly, and even then, buyers are hesitant. The reasons for Portland's decline are layered. First, the city's image has taken a hit. Concerns about homelessness, public safety, and quality of life have driven away buyers who once saw Portland as an ideal destination. Second, remote work, which initially brought people to Portland, is no longer the golden ticket. Companies are recalling workers, and those who moved for lifestyle are reassessing whether the trade-offs are worth it. Third, Oregon's tax structure is harsh. High income taxes combined with rising property taxes make homeownership more expensive than many anticipated. Investors who bought during the boom are exiting, unable to make rental properties pencil out with softer demand and rising costs. Builders who launched projects during the peak are now sitting on unsold inventory, offering incentives and credits that still aren't enough to move homes. Suburban areas like Beaverton, Gresham, and Hillsborough are also struggling. New construction has flooded these markets, creating competition that's driving prices down across the board. Even waterfront properties and homes near popular neighborhoods are seeing price cuts. Buyers are cautious, sensing that the bottom hasn't been reached yet. Portland's correction is about more than numbers. It's about perception. The city that once symbolized progressive livability is now grappling with an identity crisis, and the housing market is bearing the brunt. The craft breweries and food carts are still there, but the appeal that once drove home prices skyward has faded, and the market is paying the price. Number 2. San Jose, California. San Jose, the beating heart of Silicon Valley, is experiencing a housing crash that few saw coming. For decades, the city's proximity to the world's biggest tech companies made it a fortress of real estate appreciation. Homes routinely sold for over-asking. Bidding wars were standard, and even modest properties commanded prices that seemed absurd anywhere else in the country. But 2025 has rewritten the script. Home prices have dropped about 13%, and the market that once felt invincible is showing deep cracks. Listings in neighborhoods like Willow Glen, Almaden Valley, and Evergreen are sitting unsold for months. Price cuts are aggressive, and even with reductions, interest remains weak. The collapse traces back to the tech industry's unraveling. Mass layoffs at Google, Apple, Meta, and countless startups have gutted the high-income buyer pool. Remote work, once seen as temporary, has become permanent for many companies, allowing employees to leave the Bay Area entirely. Why pay $1.8 million for a modest home in San Jose when you can buy a mansion in Austin or Nashville for half the price? That question is echoing across Silicon Valley, and the exodus is real. Investors who bought during the boom are trapped. Refinancing is impossible with current rates, and selling means taking massive losses. Some are holding on, hoping for a rebound, but with inventory climbing and demand shrinking, that hope feels increasingly misplaced. Suburban areas like Cupertino, Saratoga, and Los Gatos, long considered premium, are also suffering. Homes that used to sell based on school district reputation alone are now sitting, as buyers realize they can get better value elsewhere. New construction, once a rarity in land-constrained Silicon Valley, is starting to appear, and builders are undercutting resale prices to move units. San Jose's crash isn't just a market correction, it's a fundamental shift. The city that defined tech wealth is now learning that even the most powerful industries have limits. The innovation is still there, but the housing market built on that innovation is crumbling, and the fallout is reshaping the entire Bay Area. Number 1. San Francisco, California. At the top of the list, in the position no one ever expected, sits San Francisco. For generations, the city's housing market was considered untouchable. Limited land, endless demand, and a steady stream of wealth from the tech industry created a market where prices only went one direction: up. But in 2025, that myth has been shattered. Home prices have plummeted roughly 15%, the steepest decline of any major U.S. city, and the fall is accelerating. Homes in Pacific Heights, Russian Hill, and the Marina are sitting unsold for months, with sellers slashing prices repeatedly just to attract interest. Condos downtown that used to command $1.5 million are now listed under $1.1 million and still not moving. The collapse is rooted in a perfect storm of factors. Tech layoffs have decimated the high-earning buyer base. Remote work has become entrenched, and many who left during the pandemic have no intention of returning. Why live in a cramped, expensive city when you can work from anywhere? The exodus isn't slowing, it's solidifying. At the same time, concerns about safety, homelessness, and quality of life have eroded the city's appeal. Buyers who once overlooked these issues because San Francisco was worth it are no longer convinced. Wealthy professionals are choosing suburbs, other states, or even other countries. International buyers, once a stabilizing force, have pulled back dramatically, spooked by instability and unfavorable currency exchange. Investors who bought during the peak are facing financial ruin. Carrying costs are astronomical, rental income has softened, and selling means accepting catastrophic losses. Some are simply walking away, letting properties slip into foreclosure rather than continuing to bleed money. New developments, built with the assumption that demand would never fade, are sitting partially sold. Builders are offering incentives that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. Price cuts, free upgrades, even covering HOA fees for years, and still, units sit empty. The skyline that once symbolized innovation and limitless possibility now feels almost haunted, a monument to overconfidence. San Francisco's crash isn't just a market correction. It's a complete unraveling of the assumptions that propped up one of the world's most expensive housing markets. The city that once defined the American dream of tech wealth is now a cautionary tale about what happens when an entire economy is built on a single industry and that industry stumbles. The Golden Gate still gleams in the fog, but the housing market beneath it has lost its luster entirely, and the wreckage is profound. Across the country, a seismic shift is taking place. For the first time in over a decade, the unstoppable rise in home prices has reversed. Cities that defined the boom are now leading the bust. And while this correction brings relief to some, it's devastating for others. Homeowners who stretch their finances are trapped. Investors who believed appreciation was guaranteed are facing ruin. Builders who bet on endless demand are sitting on inventory they can't move. But for buyers who have been locked out for years, this moment represents opportunity. The balance of power is shifting, and those who stayed patient are finally seeing options. The lesson from these 11 cities is clear. No market, no matter how strong, is immune to gravity. When prices detach from income, when speculation overtakes fundamentals, the correction is inevitable. And when it comes, it's often faster and more brutal than anyone imagined. If this breakdown opened your eyes to where housing is headed, make sure you subscribe and stay locked in, because what we're seeing in 2025 is only the beginning.